Portals. Portals. Portals.
Programming 7th symbol into computer.
Portals?
That'll keep them busy for a while.
Yes, we're here to talk about portals. Puddles? Portals. Welcome to a beginner's guide to writing portal fiction, or as the kids are calling it, Isekai. Why do they call it that? Great question. Why do they call comic book mangoes? If I pay a Mexican architect to design my house, I don't insist all my neighbors call it a casa. That would be weird. Now it would be easy if Isekai meant death and portals meant portals, but that isn't necessarily the case either. They are seemingly interchangeable based on my 5 minutes of Googling this question. Google is amazing. Who even needs to think for themselves nowadays? With that said, I'm going to call it portal fiction, portal fantasy, and if you want to call it Isekai, you do that. That's fine. Speaking of not thinking for yourself, let's talk about what you're going to learn in my video. Actually, I'm just joking. It's fine to learn. We're going to go over some basic story structure, the importance of elements, and basically everything you're going to need to start your story and have it be a functional fiction, whether that be in the web novel format or in an actual book format. And this is a great story type for beginners to write because it's really easy to get into. It's really easy for people to read, and really functionally the only thing that differs from other stories is the beginning and possibly the end, but we'll get to that. But I'm getting ahead of myself here because I haven't even defined this genre. So for those of you out of the loop, what is portal fantasy? Portal fantasy is when someone from Earth goes to another world through a proverbial portal. So in furtherance of that, I'm going to break down the basic elements and provide a template for you, the writer, to create your own. I'll be using a bunch of examples, as you've probably already seen in this video as you're watching it, because I edit that in later. I don't know what I'm using right now in the little clips. But as an American, I'm going to be relying heavily on Narnia. I guess that'd be more appropriate if I was British, but the granddaddy of portal fiction. And you're going to see there's very specific reasons I use this. The man wrote seven portal fiction novels in one collection alone. And we'll get into some of the other books too. But he wrote 7 books in this one collection, and he did it in a bunch of different ways. So first we have to ask ourselves, do you want to write portal fantasy? There are, not infinite, but there's a lot of things you can write. Advantage 1. As opposed to Frodo starting in the Shire or small farm boy not knowing about the world at large, these types of fantasy stories start with your grounding on Earth. Why? Portal fantasy lets you establish the world. The reader can immediately understand a character from Earth in a way they perhaps can't from somewhere else. You don't have to explain what a hobbit is. We understand what a high school student looks like. Yeah? You don't have to do a lot of world building in your initial chapters. You don't have to explain the coming of age ritual. You don't have to explain where we are. If you put Chicago, USA, the audience understands where that is, as opposed to Emmons Field, Dune, Arrakis. Problems and backstory you're creating for your character are really easy to understand and are going to translate to an audience from Earth a lot easier. Everyone knows what it's like to go through high school. And which one of us hasn't experienced a German carpet bombing of their home? I know I have. 3 times last week. Those Germans. Advantage 2, the sense of discovery. Because we're moving from Earth, we have this sense of discovery. It's easier to write someone being transported somewhere else and discovering the world than it is for someone who's already in their own world to discover it. Don't get me wrong here. It's entirely possible to not do it that way. You can have a fantasy character who doesn't understand the magic of their world and doesn't know what's going on and have that revealed to them. But in terms of a difficulty in starting writing, it's easier this way. Having to create a character with pre-established backstory in this world and world building restrains you, the author. Sure, Luke didn't know about the Force, never heard anything about an ancient and forgotten religion. But let's assume you want to do a nuts-to-butts fantasy world. Magic is inherent. Everyone's slinging spells and it's crazy. It'd be practically impossible to introduce a character in a new way to that if they're from that world, right? And it doesn't even have to be magic. Maybe it's politics. Maybe your story takes place on a planet that's the size of Rhode Island, and it's just impossible for people not to know. Advantage 3. Portal fantasy is very popular in the web novel format, to the point where it's everywhere. And I do want to be really clear on that one point right there. Listen up, you aspiring authors, you artists who are going to go be who are going to write a story and submit it right to a publisher because you don't know agents exist yet. Here's the bad news. Portal fantasy isn't going to sell right now to a professional sphere. Portal fantasy had its heyday a long time ago, and a lot of agents don't want to even read a query, e.g. the one page that you send to them to try to get them to take you on as their client and sell to the publishers. That's my up-to-date knowledge. And as far as I can tell, that's still the case in the industry. Subject to change, yes. Maybe by the time you finish writing your novel, it'll be back in vogue. But unless you have just a killer idea that you think is going to revolutionize the genre and make it popular again, don't expect to sell. It would go something like this.
Several hundred years frozen in ice, and I dreamt of the most miraculous story. Wow, I gotta say, Shakespeare, big fan. Of all the literary agents in the world, I love you the most. Please, read this new revolutionary story I wrote. Oh, what's this? A new Shakespeare manuscript?
Perhaps the fourth and best reason that you might want to write portal fantasy is that you just like it yourself. You grew up on it, you love reading web novels, what have you. And that's the best reason. If you just want to write something because you enjoy it, good on you. So we've established that you want to write portal fantasy. Where do you start? Section 1, Earth. A quick shout out and say you should probably read comparable books and works that you want to emulate. If you're writing a novel, like it or hate it, you should probably read the portal fantasy everyone knows and loves. If you want to write a web novel, find one that you love, that people think is good, and start there. But of course, this is a video on how to write it, so I'm going to get into the details too. But I'm saying you need to have that wide expanse to see how it's been done before. It's super helpful to be well read on any topic that you're trying to engage with. But step 1, Earth. Yeah? We start on Earth. You can have a prologue that maybe happens at this fantasy world to set up that conflict we're going to, but the story starts on Earth, in the real world. This might seem like common sense, but a lot of people actually skip this step. People are bored with what they already know and just like, let's get the story started because we're going to be writing about this fantasy world. I'm going to kill my character, they're going to jump through a portal, and we're going to get to where we want to go. Hold your horse. You need to establish your main character in the real world. Use that relatability we talked about. Give them problems. Establish relationships. Establish the stakes and conflicts that will appear later in the book. And you don't even have to do this linearly. Maybe you want to start in the portal world, the other world, and you don't want to establish that up front, but it needs to be there somewhere, because if not, why are you writing in this genre? This genre only has 3 or 4 unique things going for it. So you need to utilize that. And for the setup on Earth, I'm not going to get into the basics of storytelling here. We're not here to discuss how to establish characters, how to establish conflicts, any of that. Just do it. Flesh it out and use as much space as you need before transferring into that new world. Once you've checked off everything you can accomplish and need to accomplish in Earth, then we can switch it over. Make your characters feel human You got it. Flesh it out. How much space should you take to do this? Normally, web novels will do this in a single chapter, right? The ones that do it at all. And then books, it varies. If you're writing a novel, it varies because normally when you're writing 300-page plus pages, there's more setup, there's more conflicts, there's bigger character arcs, and it's all probably more planned out. Looking at our book here, Narnia, for just a hot second, it takes them 23 pages and like 5 chapters before they're permanently on the other side. And obviously that book is structured a little different because they're back and forth a little bit. Maybe that's better for a novel writer. Everybody loves The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, even if it doesn't hold up as an adult. I'm just saying, no one liked The Silver Chair. Simply put, step 1, start on Earth, make your audience feel comfortable there, establish what you need, moving on. Step 2 is the process of moving over. This is accomplished through portals, as the name we all obviously, yeah, you got it, or death. And those are actually different, moving them over to the fantasy world, or sci-fi. I guess there's really, it could be any kind of world, although portals and reincarnation, that's all fantasy concept. But yeah, nothing's stopping you from getting real weird with it. Portals are more popular in novels. Dying is more popular in the web novel format. Both work, both serve the same purpose, both have slightly different effects on the story. Let's explore those options because there's slight differences functionally. So the portal, not as popular as it used to be, but still functional for a very good reason. The person gets to live. Here's where everyone tunes out as I talk about classic story structure, but I'm gonna get through this quick. Just quick. Joseph Campbell. We all know Joseph Campbell and his proto-hero's journey story. It's on screen now. Here we go. Boom. It's been quoted to death. Everyone knows it. A lot of people probably hate it at this point, but it's a solid structure for a story. And if you want to write in some capacity, it'd be helpful to know this. But at the same time, you shouldn't get too hung up on it. I'm not saying you should only write like this. I'm just saying, know it. I'm always encouraging people to get real weird with it, but if you're just starting out, start with the basics. You might want to start your story off like this. So the basic tenets of this Joseph Campbell's monomyth in terms of portal fantasy are these ideas of departure and return. In that sense, portal fantasy is this classic structure taken to an extreme. When using portals, there is a literal departure to another plane of existence and often that same return because you're still alive, you're using portals. So you're taking this departure and return to an exaggerated amount. And that's the advantage of portals over death. You are allowing this return. Effectively, your conclusion, which is going to be the last thing a lot of people plan, but maybe you shouldn't, your conclusion will basically write itself. It allows your characters to come back and defeat their personal demons, their personal weaknesses in a very real and literal way. In that way, the portal fantasy is a paint-by-numbers version of this proto-story. If you want to write portal fantasy, parts of it are unscrew-upable. Your character has to depart. And if you're using portals, the natural conclusion is for him/her to come back. And if in response to that last clip, you're saying that Jumanji isn't portal fantasy, don't include it. That I say, yes it is. And if you're still going to complain about it, I'm going to start playing scenes from Zathura. Yeah, Zathura.
And listen to me. Dad put me in charge until he got home, which means you guys need to do what I say.
Lisa, please, we're really scared. Can you just watch what this game does? Watch this. Here. Okay, so wind the key.
All right, so now I'm winding the key.
Yeah, see? And then
Then
push the
pop
button.
down. So push it
Pop down. Yeah.
Aside from all of this, portals have that ability to include choice as well for the departure. Your characters may be making a volitional choice to leave their world, which you can't always include in death. Ever heard of kill your darlings? Death has merit too. Also in writing. So much so that Lewis also did portal fantasy death in his last story. Oh, now it makes so much sense why I'm relying on Narnia. Spoilers that I don't care about doing because it's old and you've had your chance to read it, is that at the final book, all these characters we've come to know and love die, and that's how they get to Narnia. There's a lot of death in Narnia. So death lacks that classic return, but you still need to go ahead and plan out a character arc. Your character still needs to resolve their problems that have been set up, but perhaps in a more metaphorical sense. And perhaps your problems are more internalized than externalized. I'm just saying you can't come back and be friends with your father if you're dead. But you can have those internal changes that would lead to that. And just like that, it makes way more sense why we're talking about Jumanji 2, doesn't it? And this is just personal preference where I'm coming from on this, totally opinion. But I also think that if you're killing your characters, it also creates a slightly bigger investment for them in this new world. They can't just cut ties and leave, right? They're screwed if the world is screwed. So I think it perhaps begets a larger scale story. So we're on Earth. You've chosen whether you're going to do a portal or you're going to kill them. What's next? Well, specifically how, right? What kind of portal? What kind of death mechanism? What kind of furniture should they disappear into? Technically, anything works, but try and connect it to what's been established. The Greeks have this word called apropos. But really, it's a simple way of setting set up and pay off. Things in your story should relate, things should connect. If you introduce a character flaw, have your character's death perhaps be related to that character flaw. You know, like a story. For portals, it's a little trickier. Maybe finding a portal would be appropriate in some way to something that's happened. Maybe finding the portal is related to the setting that you're using. As a storyteller, do something clever, be creative, and make the reader say, I see what you did there. Don't just have a portal appear out of thin air completely unrelated. You can do that. It's just weaker than, thinking about it. I'm not trying to make this a competition, but remember, this is a popular genre and everyone and their mother wants to be a writer. And if you're writing in a genre with a million other people, you need to do something to stand out. Review. Step 1, Earth. Step 2, setup. Step 3, choose portal or death. Step 4, relate that portal or death back to the setup. Boom. Now we're at our final step before you can merely skip away from your computer to a different computer to write your portal fantasy. That was horrible. Yes, believe it or not, we're at the end already. It is that easy. Because once you get to that new world, you can write your story like any other story. Maybe I'll cover those fundamentals some other day, but I'll just leave you with a few ideas. A few things to consider, perhaps. You want to go ahead and try and meet new characters. This is typically the point of the story where your character will meet a mentor, someone to show them the way, someone to walk them through the world and teach them, just like the audience is being taught, because your character is a stand-in for the audience in this new world. Just make sure to establish that relationship with the mentor and establish why they're helping your character. You want to have your character explore and understand the world. You're in a new place. What's going on? What is that? What is this? How does magic work? These are things people do in new situations. Politics, geography, magic, spelunking, whatever it is, I would encourage you, the writer, to focus on what you love. Subheading 3. What is your character's purpose now? Do they want to get home? Do they want to save the world? Do they want to just survive? Your character needs to have a heading, and it needs to be believable. We need to know where this story is heading at some point. Put yourself into this situation. What would you want to do in this new world? And most importantly, react to all of the above. Positive or negative, your character needs to have some reaction to everything that's happening to them. If someone died and ended up in another world, they would have strong feelings on that. If someone was passed by that world's deity to save the world, portals, that would be stressful. More portals. So have an emotional core. Maybe they miss their family. Maybe they were a loser who's happy about having a second chance in life. And with that, you are ready to write your story. Or are you? I wanted to add this because there seems to be a small debate on what a portal actually is. No, really. A lot of people like to exaggerate and point to the leaving part of my circle here, or I should say Joseph Campbell's circle, and say any leaving is a portal. If you get on a starship and go to another world, that's a portal. And to that I say, maybe. If you're in a sci-fi universe where there's tons of space shuttles, it's not a portal. It's just walking, transportation. But if there's a single faster-than-light ship in the galaxy that can get you anywhere, boom, portal fantasy. Harry Potter gets on a train, goes to a place you can't see and can't otherwise get to, and he has to stay there for a full year until he comes back home on that train. Portal fantasy. And I hear a lot of people about to object to that, so I'm going to little asterisk here. That becomes less true as the series goes on. By the time you hit book 5, Harry and his friends can pretty much come and go whenever they leave. But if you look at the first, let's say, 4 books, there's really only ever one way in and out of Hogwarts for them. Effectively meaning they're stuck there, effectively making it a portal fantasy. So what am I rambling about? I'm just saying don't be afraid to be imaginative and to get creative in how you want to execute these elements that I've laid out for you. If it's abnormal and they can't come back, it's probably portal fantasy. Plane crashes are not abnormal. Disclaimer. Ye old disclaimer. Any rules I or anyone else have are breakable. Anything anyone tells you for whatever reason, you don't have to listen to. It's about you and your vision, so take this information as guidelines to achieve what you want to build. Use it as a springboard to get over hurdles when you're stuck. I'm just saying, think it through and be intentional, yeah? Here's the thing, being aware of tropes, structure, and style, that can lead to interesting subversions and commentary on the genre in and of itself. The ability to transform ideas. But hey, maybe you just want to go out and just write. You don't care about any of this. But to that I say, why are you watching this video? You silly goose. Portals!